Hey there. I hope you found yourself somewhere peaceful tonight, maybe curled up in something comfortable while the day's demands finally quiet around you. If you're here, perhaps your mind is still racing with modern pressures, or maybe you're one of those souls who find solace in slipping away to distant times and forgotten lives. Either way, you're welcome in this quiet corner of history. Tonight, we're stepping through the marble corridors of ancient Rome, past the olive vendors and wine merchants, beyond the grand forums where senators debate the fate of empires, and into a world that's been mythologized by Hollywood but rarely understood in its full, complex humanity. We're going to spend a day with someone whose name might have been carved in stone, whose face might have been painted on amphitheater walls, but whose inner life, the hopes and fears and small daily rituals, has been lost to legend and spectacle. If these gentle journeys through time bring you some peace, a quiet light helps other restless souls find their way here when sleep feels distant. And if you'd like to join us for more of these historical wanderings, there's a subscribe button nearby, patient as a Roman statue, along with that little bell that can whisper to you when we have new stories to share. Sometimes the most thoughtful conversations happen in the comments below, where people share their own dreams of ancient worlds or family stories that echo across centuries. But for now, let the modern world dissolve like morning mist and step barefoot onto the sun-warmed stones of ancient Rome, where the air tastes of dust and olive oil and ambition, where every dawn brings the ancient dance between glory and survival, honor and necessity. The first thing you must understand about waking as a gladiator in the ludus of Rome, perhaps in the year 80 AD, when the great Colosseum still gleams with fresh marble, is that darkness holds no terrors for you anymore. You've learned to befriend the shadows, to find comfort in the hours before dawn, when the world belongs only to guards walking their circuits and the occasional cat-hunting mice in the corridors. Your cell, and it is a cell, though you've grown to think of it as simply home, is small but not uncomfortable, carved from good Roman stone that stays cool in summer and holds warmth from braziers in winter. The walls around you have witnessed more stories than any amphitheater. Scratched into the stone are the marks of those who came before, small tallies marking victories, names of lovers left behind in distant provinces, crude drawings of lions and bears, and the weapons that might defeat them. Your own mark is there too, a simple inscription of your fighting name, Ferox, carved on the day you won your first fight and realized you might actually survive this life that chose you rather than the other way around. Your sleeping arrangement is surprisingly comfortable, a real bed with a wooden frame and straw mattress, not the stone shelf that prisoners endure. The ludus owners aren't cruel, they're businessmen, and a well-rested gladiator fights better than an exhausted one. The woolen blanket that covers you is of decent quality, dyed a practical brown that doesn't show the dust and oil that are constant companions in this life. Even the pillow is stuffed with reasonably soft material, though after years of sleeping on campaign grounds and in various temporary quarters, you've learned to find rest wherever it's offered. The air in the gladiator quarters carries a distinctive mix of scents that has become as familiar as breathing olive oil used for massages and skincare, the sharp tang of vinegar that cleans wounds and flavors food, leather from armor and training equipment, and the underlying mineral smell of stone that never quite leaves any Roman building. There's also something else, something harder to define, the scent of men living in close quarters, not unpleasant but distinctly human, mixed with the herbs that the ludus physician burns to ward off illness, and the faint sweetness of incense from the small shrine where gladiators make their private offerings to various gods. The sound that wakes you isn't a horn or bell, though you suspect if Romans had invented snooze buttons, the guards wouldn't honor them anyway. Instead, it's something more subtle, the soft scrape of sandals on stone as the guards begin their morning routine, the distant clank of keys, the gentle splash of water being poured into washing basins. Your body has learned to respond to these quiet signals, emerging from sleep naturally rather than being jolted awake. There's a grace to this gradual awakening that you've come to appreciate, a gentle transition from the world of dreams, which lately have been filled with visions of the small farm where you grew up, before the legions recruited you, before the injury that ended your military career and led you here. Rolling from the bed, your feet find the cool stone floor, smooth from generations of gladiators who have walked this same path. Your body moves with the careful precision of someone who has learned that every joint, every muscle, every limb is a valuable tool that must be maintained and protected. The morning stretch is ritual now, arms overhead, back twisted gently left and right, legs extended to wake the muscles that will soon be called upon for training. There's satisfaction in the way your body responds, in the strength you've built, not just for fighting, but for the pure joy of physical capability. The wash basin in the corner contains fresh water, another sign that the ludus is well run. The water is cold enough to shock you fully awake, but there's luxury in its cleanliness, in the knowledge that you'll be washed and presentable, rather than stumbling into the day grimy and disheveled. The soap is simple but effective, made from olive oil and ash, and it lathers well enough to remove yesterday's dust and sweat. Splashing the cold water on your face, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the polished bronze mirror that hangs on the wall, a face that's acquired some new scars since arriving here, but also a confidence that wasn't there before. The arena has a way of showing you exactly what you're capable of, for better and worse. Your reflection shows someone who has learned to carry himself differently than the nervous farm boy, or even the disciplined legionnaire you once were. There's a stillness in your eyes, a way of holding your shoulders that speaks of someone who has faced death repeatedly and found he can not only survive it, but sometimes even dance with it gracefully. The scars tell stories, the thin line across your shoulder from a Rhetarius's trident that came closer than comfort would prefer, the mark on your forearm where you blocked a gladius awkwardly during your early training days, the small nick near your ear from a piece of flying debris during a particularly elaborate animal hunt that involved more theatrical smoke than actual danger. Dressing is a matter of practical choices made from limited options. The tunic is clean and well made, dyed a deep red that has become associated with gladiators throughout the empire. The color isn't chosen for dramatic effect, but for practical reasons. It doesn't show bloodstains as readily as lighter colors, and it looks impressive in the bright arena sand under the Mediterranean sun. The fabric is linen rather than wool, better for the physical demands of training and fighting, though warm enough for the cool Roman morning. Over this goes a leather belt, well oiled and supple, from which hangs a small eating knife and a pouch for the few personal possessions that make this cell feel like home. The personal items are few but meaningful. A small bronze amulet depicting Mercury, patron of quick thinking and quicker feet, a gift from your trainer after your first victory. Mercury seems like a practical god for a gladiator. If you're going to pray to anyone, might as well choose the one who specializes in getting out of difficult situations quickly. A letter from your sister, now yellow with age and soft from repeated reading, tells of life in the village and asks when you might return. She doesn't understand that gladiators don't simply leave when they choose. Freedom must be earned through victory and crowd favor and the whims of fate. There's also a small carved bone die, perfectly balanced, that you use for gambling games that help pass the long hours between training and fighting. Not because you're particularly lucky, but because mathematics of probability provide a kind of meditation, a way of thinking about chance and skill that applies as much to arena sand as to gaming tables. The morning routine includes a visit to the small shrine that occupies one corner of the quarters. It's not officially sanctioned by the ludus, but it's not forbidden either, and the guards have learned to look the other way during these private moments. The shrine is simple, a niche carved into the wall containing small statues of Mars for courage, Fortuna for luck, and Nemesis for the justice that balances all accounts. A few drops of wine poured onto the small altar, a whispered prayer that's half plea and half gratitude, and you're ready to face whatever the day might bring. The prayers aren't elaborate theological discussions with the gods, but practical conversations with cosmic forces that might or might not be listening. Mars, let my sword arm be steady today. Fortuna, let the crowd favor me if I fight well. Nemesis, let justice be done, whatever that means. These aren't the desperate pleas of someone who expects divine intervention, but rather the quiet requests of someone who understands that skill and preparation can only take you so far, and that there are larger forces at work in the universe that might be worth acknowledging politely. Walking through the corridors toward the central courtyard where the day's activities will begin, you pass the cells of your fellow gladiators, men who have become something closer than friends, partners in a very specific type of survival that few others can understand. Marcus, the Thracian who fights with the distinctive small shield and curved sword of his homeland, is already awake and practicing the intricate footwork that makes him nearly impossible to pin down in combat. His movements are so fluid, they look like dance, and there's something beautiful about watching a master craftsman at work, even when that craft involves violence. Quintus, the Retiarius who fights with trident and net, sits on his bed methodically checking his equipment, running his fingers along the prongs of his weapon to ensure they're sharp, examining the knots in his net to make sure none have loosened during yesterday's training. He's methodical about everything, which is why he's survived longer than most in a fighting style that offers little protection and depends entirely on speed and precision. There's a lesson in his careful preparation, in the way he treats his equipment, not as tools of war, but as extensions of his own body that must be understood and maintained with the same care he gives to his physical conditioning. The newer gladiators are easier to spot. They move with the nervous energy of men still adjusting to their circumstances, still hoping this might be temporary, still believing they might find a way back to whatever life they left behind. You remember that feeling, that sense of displacement and disbelief that this had become your reality. Time and experience have taught you that acceptance isn't surrender, but rather a form of wisdom, a way of finding peace within circumstances you cannot change, while working toward outcomes you can influence. The central courtyard is the heart of the ludus, a rectangular space surrounded by two-story buildings that house everything from sleeping quarters to armories to the physician's surgery. The courtyard itself is packed earth, swept clean each morning by slaves, whose job it is to maintain the training ground where gladiators practice the skills that keep them alive. The morning sun slants across the space at an angle that will shift throughout the day, and part of your training has involved learning to fight in different light conditions, understanding how shadows and brightness can be used tactically in combat. The first official activity of the day is the morning assembly, where the Lanasta, the owner and head trainer of the Gladiator School, reviews the day's schedule and addresses any issues that need attention. He's a former gladiator himself, a man who earned his freedom through skill and crowd favor, and has now built a successful business, training others to follow his path. His presence commands respect, not through fear, but through demonstrated competence, the authority of someone who has walked this path and survived to profit from the knowledge. This morning's announcements are routine, training assignments for different skill levels, a reminder that new equipment has arrived and must be properly maintained, word that a group of visiting dignitaries will observe afternoon practice as potential investors in gladiator futures. The Lannister's voice carries the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but there's also a paternal quality to his leadership. These gladiators represent significant investments of time and money, and their success or failure directly impacts his prosperity. Enlightened self-interest has taught him to treat his fighters well, to provide good food and medical care and training, because healthy gladiators win more fights and generate more profit. But beyond the business relationship, there's genuine respect between the Lannister and his fighters. He understands the courage required to step into the arena, the skill needed to survive repeated combat, the mental strength required to perform under pressure while thousands of spectators cheer for blood. He's been where you are, felt the sand hot beneath his feet, and heard the crowd's roar wash over him like a physical force. This shared experience creates a bond that transcends the usual relationships between owner and property, employer and employee. After the morning assembly, the gladiators separate into their different training groups based on fighting style and experience level. You're assigned to the secular class, heavily armed gladiators who fight with sword and large shield, typically matched against the more lightly equipped rutarius fighters. The training is rigorous and purposeful, designed not just to build strength and skill, but to develop the kind of automatic responses that can save your life when conscious thought becomes impossible under combat stress. The morning begins with physical conditioning that would challenge even the fittest modern athlete. Running circuits around the courtyard, timing carefully measured to build endurance without exhausting muscles needed for weapons training later. The Romans understand something about interval training that won't be discovered by fitness experts for another 2,000 years. Calisthenics focus on the specific muscle groups used in combat, exercises designed by generations of trainers who understood exactly which movements would translate into fighting effectiveness. Wrestling matches teach balance and leverage and the intimate knowledge of how bodies move and can be moved, skills that prove invaluable when combat becomes close and personal. The weapons training starts with wooden practice swords and shields, heavier than the real weapons you'll use in combat. This added weight builds strength and ensures that when you finally hold actual combat gear, it feels light and responsive in your hands. The training dummy is a wooden post wrapped in straw and leather, scarred by thousands of practice strikes from generations of gladiators. Hitting it correctly produces a specific sound and feel that becomes second nature, muscle memory that will serve you when adrenaline makes conscious thought difficult. Your trainer is a grizzled veteran named Gaius, who lost his left arm in the arena but retained his life and freedom. He watches your technique with the critical eye of someone who understands that proper form isn't about looking impressive, but about staying alive. Your shield is drifting low on the recovery, he observes, tapping your elbow with his remaining hand. In the arena, that opens your ribs to a thrust that ends badly. His corrections aren't harsh, but they're insistent, backed by the authority of experience and the knowledge that sloppy habits in training become fatal mistakes in combat. The footwork drills are perhaps the most important part of training, though they might look boring to casual observers. Hours spent learning to move efficiently across sand, how to maintain balance while advancing or retreating, how to control distance and timing and angle of attack. Sand is a treacherous surface that shifts underfoot and can turn an ankle or catch a heel at precisely the wrong moment. Learning to read its texture and adjust your movement accordingly is a skill that can't be rushed or shortcut, only developed through patient repetition. Sparring sessions with other gladiators provide the most realistic training possible, short of actual combat. These matches are conducted with blunted weapons and careful supervision, but they're still intense enough to produce real sweat and occasional real blood. Fighting against Marcus teaches you to deal with speed and unpredictability. His Thracian fighting style emphasizes quick, darting attacks that come from unexpected angles. The man moves like he's perpetually late for an appointment with destiny. Fighting against Quintus helps you learn to counter the unique challenges posed by net and trident, how to avoid entanglement while closing distance against an opponent whose reach advantage is considerable. Each sparring partner presents different lessons. The massive Germanic fighter teaches you about managing superior strength and reach, how to use speed and technique to neutralize advantages in size and power. He's built like a siege engine, but moves with surprising grace. The agile Numidian shows you footwork techniques adapted to different cultural fighting traditions, movements that look like dance but serve deadly practical purposes. Even the newest recruits offer valuable training opportunities, if only to practice maintaining discipline and technique against opponents whose desperation makes them unpredictable. The morning training concludes with what the trainers call conditioning, exercises designed to build the specific type of endurance needed for arena combat. This isn't the steady-state cardio of distance running, but rather the explosive anaerobic fitness required for intense bursts of activity, followed by brief recovery periods. Shield work builds shoulders and arms strong enough to deflect repeated strikes. Sword drills develop the precise muscle control needed to place cuts and thrusts exactly where intended. Defensive movements become automatic responses to incoming attacks. By the time morning training ends, the Mediterranean sun has climbed high enough to make the courtyard uncomfortably warm, and sweat has soaked through tunics and made practice weapons slippery in your hands. But there's a satisfaction in the fatigue, a sense of having earned the rest that follows. Your body feels loose and strong, properly warmed and stretched, ready for whatever physical demands the day might bring. The training has served its dual purpose, maintaining the physical capabilities that keep you alive and providing the mental focus that comes from complete concentration on immediate practical tasks. The midday meal is served in the common dining area, a large room with long wooden tables where gladiators gather to eat and socialize. The food is better than what most Romans of modest means enjoy, Plenty of meat and vegetables, fresh bread, watered wine or beer, even occasional luxuries like olives or cheese. The ludus owners understand that proper nutrition is essential for maintaining fighters at peak condition, and the cost of good food is more than offset by improved performance in the arena. It's remarkable how motivating good food can be when your life depends on peak physical condition. But beyond the practical considerations, the shared meals serve important social functions. This is where friendships are formed and maintained, where news and gossip circulate, where the informal hierarchies and alliances that exist among the gladiators are negotiated and reinforced. Conversation flows easily between topics, reminiscences of homes left behind, analysis of fighting techniques observed in recent games, speculation about upcoming matches and potential opponents. The bread is dense and flavorful, baked fresh each morning in the ludus kitchens from good wheat flour rather than the barley or millet that many Romans must content themselves with. Tearing off a piece and dipping it in olive oil flavored with herbs, you taste not just nutrition, but a small luxury, a reminder that even in this constrained life, there are pleasures to be found and appreciated. The meat is usually pork or beef, well seasoned and properly cooked, providing the protein needed to build and maintain muscle mass. Even the vegetables are prepared with care, onions and leeks and carrots that add flavor and nutrition to meals that could otherwise become monotonous. The social dynamics of the dining room are complex and fascinating. Gladiators who might face each other in the arena sit side by side, sharing food and conversation with the easy camaraderie of professionals who understand each other's challenges. There's an unspoken agreement that whatever happens in combat stays in combat. Personal relationships are separate from professional obligations. You might spend an afternoon trying to kill Marcus in the arena, and that evening share wine and stories about your respective homelands. It's a sophisticated separation of roles that allows men to maintain their humanity while fulfilling their professional duties. Some of the gladiators have formed closer bonds, partnerships that extend beyond mere friendship into something approaching brotherhood. These relationships often develop between fighters whose styles complement each other in training, or who have shared particularly intense experiences in the arena. There's a quiet understanding among these pairs, a way of communicating without words, an instinctive knowledge of how the other thinks and moves and reacts under pressure. These bonds provide emotional support in a life where psychological pressures can be as dangerous as physical ones. The conversation during meals tends to be surprisingly mundane, focusing on the small details of daily life rather than the dramatic aspects of arena combat. Someone mentions that his tunic is wearing thin and needs replacement. Another gladiator describes a letter received from family, sharing news of harvests and marriages and births that continue in the world beyond the ludus walls. There's discussion of a new fighting technique observed during yesterday's public games, analyzed not for its dramatic effect, but for its practical applications and potential counters. Occasionally, someone will mention the philosophical questions that naturally arise from living a life where death is a constant professional possibility. What happens after we die? Do the gods really involve themselves in human affairs? Is courage a choice or simply a byproduct of experience and training? These conversations aren't morbid or frightening, but rather thoughtful discussions among men who have been forced to confront fundamental questions about existence and meaning that most people can avoid thinking about. Marcus tells a story about his village in Thrace, where his grandmother claimed she could predict the weather by watching how cats sat. If they sat with their backs to the east, he says, rain within 3 days never failed. The other gladiators listen with the respectful attention of men who understand that small wisdom from home can feel precious when you're far from familiar places. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're threads that connect each fighter to something beyond the walls of the ludus, reminders that they came from somewhere and might return there someday. The afternoon brings different types of training, often focused on specific skills or scenarios that might arise in upcoming games. Today there's practice with exotic weapons, the curved falx favored by Dacian fighters, the weighted net that requires precise timing to deploy effectively, the small buckler and gladius combination that demands exceptional speed and accuracy. These sessions aren't just about learning to use unfamiliar equipment, but about understanding how to fight against opponents who might employ these weapons against you. Sometimes the afternoon training involves rehearsals for specific types of games. Gladiator combats are often themed events that tell stories or recreate famous battles from Roman history or mythology. You might spend hours learning the choreography for a recreation of the Trojan War, complete with elaborate costumes and predetermined outcomes designed to satisfy the crowd's expectations while providing sufficient drama and excitement. These theatrical elements require different skills than pure combat: timing, showmanship, the ability to make predetermined movements look spontaneous and dangerous. The most challenging afternoon sessions involve training with animals. Not all gladiator games involve human opponents. Some feature encounters with lions, bears, wild boar, or other dangerous creatures. Learning to fight animals requires completely different techniques than human combat. Animals move differently, attack from different angles, respond to different stimuli. A lion doesn't telegraph its intentions the way a human fighter does. It simply explodes into motion with speed and power that can overwhelm the unprepared. The big cats, in particular, seem to have a sense of humor about human pretensions. They'll sit perfectly still, looking bored, until the exact moment you let your guard down. Animal training takes place in a special arena within the ludus, complete with barriers and escape routes designed to protect trainers and students from potentially fatal mistakes. The animals used for training are often older or less aggressive specimens, past their prime for public games, but still dangerous enough to provide realistic practice. Working with them teaches respect for the raw power and unpredictability of wild creatures, as well as the specific techniques needed to survive encounters with opponents who don't follow human rules of engagement. The psychological preparation for animal combat is as important as the physical training. Humans have instinctive fear responses to large predators that must be overcome through exposure and conditioning. Learning to remain calm when a lion roars from 10 feet away, to maintain tactical thinking when a bear charges with surprising speed, to trust your training and equipment when every instinct screams at you to run. These are skills that can't be taught through lecture, but must be developed through carefully controlled experience. Some gladiators specialize in animal combat and rarely fight human opponents. These venators develop almost supernatural awareness of animal behavior, able to read subtle signs that indicate when a beast is about to attack, how badly it's injured, whether it's becoming more or less dangerous as a fight progresses. Their techniques are adapted to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of different species, the blind spots in a lion's vision, the limited maneuverability of a bear, the predictable charge patterns of wild boar. The most experienced venator in the ludus is a weathered man named Sergius, who speaks to animals as if they understand Latin. Perhaps they do. Certainly they seem to listen when he explains what he expects from them during training sessions. Now, Brutus, he'll say to an aging lion, we're going to practice the approach from the left side. Try to look menacing, but don't actually eat anyone today. The lion typically responds with what could charitably be called cooperation, though it's unclear whether this represents understanding or simple familiarity with routine. As the afternoon training concludes and the sun begins its descent toward the western hills of Rome, there's time for personal activities before the evening meal. Some gladiators use this time for additional practice with weapons or techniques they want to improve. Others engage in quieter pursuits, writing letters to family, reading if they're literate, playing board games or dice, or simply resting and reflecting on the day's experiences. You often spend this time maintaining your equipment, not because it's required, but because there's something meditative about the process. Cleaning and oiling leather, sharpening and polishing metal, checking straps and buckles for signs of wear. These tasks require attention, but not intense concentration, leaving your mind free to wander while your hands work automatically. There's satisfaction in having gear that's properly maintained, equipment you can trust absolutely when your life depends on its performance. The armory is a fascinating place, filled with weapons and protective gear from across the Roman Empire and beyond. Gladiator games often feature fighters representing different cultures and fighting traditions, so the equipment must reflect authentic regional styles. Germanic longswords hang alongside Thracian curved blades. Roman gladi share space with Gallic spears, and shields of every conceivable size and design line the walls like works of art. It's like a museum of warfare, except everything is meant to be used rather than simply admired. Each piece of equipment has its own history and character. The shield you prefer has been carried by 3 previous gladiators, its surface scarred by countless practice sessions and several arena combats. The weight distribution is perfect for your fighting style, and the leather grip has been shaped by hands that gripped it in life or death situations. Using equipment with this kind of provenance creates a connection to the gladiators who came before, a sense of continuing a tradition that extends back generations. Sometimes you wonder about those previous owners, who they were, where they came from, what became of them. The armorer keeps meticulous records of which equipment belonged to whom, and he's happy to share stories about former gladiators if asked. Your shield, he tells you, was first carried by a Gaul who won 7 consecutive fights before earning his freedom. The second owner was a Syrian who was known for his defensive technique, but died in his 4th combat against a particularly aggressive Thracian. The third was a freed slave who became so skilled that he was offered a position as trainer, but chose to continue fighting until age forced his retirement. The evening meal is typically more elaborate than the midday fare, served later when the day's heat has begun to fade and torches are lit to illuminate the dining area. Tonight there's roasted pork with herbs, fresh bread still warm from the ovens, vegetables prepared with olive oil and vinegar, and wine that's been mixed with water and spices to create a drink that's both refreshing and mildly intoxicating. The atmosphere is more relaxed than during the working portions of the day, with conversation flowing more freely and lasting longer than the efficient midday discussions. Some evenings feature entertainment. Gladiators who are skilled musicians will play lyres or flutes. Others might recite poetry, or tell stories from their homelands. These performances aren't professional quality, but they provide variety and cultural enrichment that help maintain morale and group cohesion. Tonight, Marcus plays a haunting melody on a wooden flute, a traditional Thracian song that speaks of mountains and freedom and the longing for home. The music creates a contemplative mood that allows each listener to retreat into private thoughts and memories. The wine helps facilitate the easy camaraderie that develops among men who share unusual circumstances and challenges. Inhibitions lower enough to permit deeper conversations about fears and hopes, regrets and ambitions, the philosophical questions that arise naturally when living a life where mortality is a daily consideration. These discussions aren't morbid or depressing, but rather thoughtful explorations of what it means to live with purpose and dignity under difficult circumstances. Sometimes the conversation turns to plans for life after the arena. Gladiators who survive long enough and win sufficient victories can earn their freedom, symbolized by the wooden sword called a ludus that marks the end of their fighting career. Some former gladiators become trainers or ludus owners themselves, using their knowledge and experience to guide the next generation. Others return to their homelands to resume interrupted lives, though often with enough prize money to live more comfortably than they could have before their arena careers. But these future plans are discussed without urgency or desperate longing. There's an acceptance of present circumstances combined with hope for eventual change, a balance between living fully in the moment and maintaining motivation for long-term goals. This psychological equilibrium is essential for survival in a profession where dwelling too much on either past regrets or future fears can prove fatal when immediate focus is required. Quintus shares his dream of returning to his coastal village and buying a fishing boat large enough to venture into deeper waters than his family had ever explored. "I want to see what's beyond the horizon," he says, gesturing vaguely toward the east. "There are islands out there that no Roman has ever set foot on, fish that have never seen a net." The other gladiators listen with respectful interest, though some probably think this is an unusual ambition for someone whose current profession involves being stabbed with sharp objects for public entertainment. As evening deepens into night and torches burn lower in their brackets, the gladiators gradually retire to their quarters. There's no strict curfew, but tomorrow will bring another day of demanding physical training, and most fighters have learned to prioritize rest and recovery as essential elements of professional preparation. The transition from public social time to private reflection happens naturally, without awkwardness or abrupt departures. Walking back through the corridors to your cell, you pass other gladiators engaged in their own evening routines. Quintus sits on his bed methodically working oil into the leather components of his armor, the repetitive motion almost meditative in its rhythm. A newer gladiator, a Germanic tribesman captured in some recent border conflict, practices sword forms in the confined space of his cell, his movements careful and precise despite the limited room for maneuver. His dedication is admirable, though you recognize the nervous energy of someone still adjusting to his circumstances, still believing that extra effort might somehow change fundamental realities. In your own cell, the evening ritual begins with a brief return to the small shrine in the corner. Tonight's prayers are grateful rather than pleading, thanks for a day survived, for health maintained, for skills that continue to develop. The gods may or may not be listening, but the act of gratitude serves important psychological functions, reinforcing a sense of agency and purpose that helps maintain mental balance under challenging circumstances. The bronze mirror shows a face that's learned to wear confidence naturally, but tonight there's also a thoughtfulness that wasn't there this morning. The day's training and social interactions have provided both physical and mental stimulation, challenges that require growth and adaptation. You're not the same person who woke up this morning, just as you're not the same person who first arrived at this ludus months ago. Growth and change are constants in this life, driven by the need to continually improve just to maintain your current level of survival. Removing the day's clothing and folding it carefully, habits of cleanliness and organization that help maintain dignity and self-respect. You prepare for sleep in the simple linen undergarment that serves as nightwear. The cell is comfortable enough, though Spartanly furnished by the standards of Roman citizens, but simplicity has its own appeal, especially when every possession is chosen for utility and maintained with care. There's freedom in owning few things but owning them completely, in having no possessions that you couldn't afford to lose. The stone walls that once seemed prison-like now feel protective, solid barriers between you and a world that can be chaotic and unpredictable. Within these walls, life follows patterns that you understand and can navigate successfully. The rules are clear, the expectations explicit, the rewards directly tied to effort and skill. There's security in this predictability, even when the ultimate stakes are higher than most people ever face. As you settle onto the straw mattress and pull the woolen blanket up to your shoulders, the sounds of the ludus at rest surround you like a familiar lullaby. The soft conversations of gladiators, not yet ready for sleep, drift through the stone corridors, along with the measured footsteps of guards walking their rounds, and the distant sounds of Rome itself, a city that never completely sleeps, where taverns and brothels and gambling houses continue their business long into the night. The darkness in your cell is complete, except for the faint glow that seeps under the door from torches burning in the corridor outside. But the darkness isn't frightening, it's restful, a natural end to a day that began before sunrise and included intense physical and mental challenges. Your body feels properly tired, not exhausted, but thoroughly used, muscles relaxed from exertion and ready for the restoration that comes with quality sleep. Sleep comes more easily now than it did in your early days at the ludus, when anxiety about the future and grief for the past made rest elusive. Experience has taught you that worry doesn't change outcomes, only preparation and performance in the moment of truth matter. This hard-won wisdom allows you to sleep peacefully, even knowing that tomorrow might bring news of upcoming games, opponents to face, challenges that will test everything you've learned. Dreams, when they come, are a mixture of past and present, memory and imagination. Sometimes you're back on the family farm, helping with harvest under skies that seem impossibly blue and vast. Sometimes you're marching with the legions through foreign landscapes, part of an army that brought Roman order to the edges of the known world. And sometimes you're in the arena, but it's not the arena as it actually exists. It's a dream arena where the crowds cheer not for blood, but for skill, where opponents become friends after combat, where victory is possible without anyone having to die. But most often, dreams are simple and immediate, the satisfaction of a perfectly executed sword technique, the camaraderie of shared meals with fellow gladiators, the quiet pride of equipment properly maintained and skills continually improved. These dreams reflect the reality of a life that has found meaning and purpose within circumstances that were never chosen but have been fully accepted. The gladiator's sleep is deep and restorative, untroubled by the complex anxieties that plague those whose lives lack clear purpose or immediate challenges. When you wake tomorrow, it will be to another day of training and preparation, another opportunity to test yourself against demanding standards, another chance to grow stronger and more skilled. The routine provides stability, the challenges provide growth, and the community provides support and meaning. Throughout the night, Rome continues its ancient rhythms around the ludus. The city breathes with the slow pulse of 800,000 inhabitants, merchants preparing for early morning markets, bakers firing ovens for the day's bread, night workers finishing shifts that began at sunset. In the great houses on the Palatine Hill, senators and wealthy merchants sleep on silk sheets under painted ceilings that depict scenes from mythology. In the insulae, the multi-story apartment buildings that house the majority of Rome's population, families crowd together in small rooms, their dreams filled with hopes for advancement and fears of poverty. But here in the gladiator quarters, sleep comes with a clarity and peace that wealth and poverty alike often fail to provide. There's something to be said for a life where purposes are clear, where skills are constantly tested and improved, where each day brings tangible challenges that can be met with preparation and courage. The gladiator sleeps not because he has no cares, but because he has learned to focus his cares on things he can actually influence through his own efforts. As the night deepens and the sounds of the city gradually fade into the soft whisper of wind through Roman streets, the ludus settles into the profound quiet that comes only in the hours before dawn. Guards continue their patient circuits, but even their footsteps seem softer, more respectful of the rest that tomorrow's training will require. In the cells around you, 40 other gladiators sleep the sleep of men who have found ways to live with dignity and purpose under circumstances that might crush those who lack their particular combination of courage, skill, and philosophical acceptance. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, the same constellations that shone down on Roman farmers and soldiers and gladiators for centuries before your birth, and will continue long after your name is forgotten. But in the limited scope of your own existence, you have found ways to make each day matter, to build skills and relationships and small victories that create meaning within the larger indifference of the universe. The gladiator's rest is earned through effort, sweetened by accomplishment, and made peaceful by the knowledge that tomorrow will bring new opportunities to test and prove yourself against worthy challenges. And in that knowledge, perhaps, lies a wisdom that transcends the specific circumstances of arena and ludus, a reminder that human dignity and satisfaction can be found in any situation where we commit ourselves fully to the pursuit of excellence, where we face our challenges with courage and skill, where we find ways to build community and meaning even within the constraints that life imposes upon us all. The gladiator sleeps peacefully, not because his life is easy, but because he has learned to live it well, within its own terms, with full commitment to the possibilities it offers for growth and achievement and human connection. The night passes in cycles of deep rest and gentle dreams, natural rhythms uninterrupted by the artificial urgencies that complicate so many modern lives. When morning comes, It will bring another day of training and preparation, another opportunity to improve skills and strengthen bonds with fellow gladiators, another chance to find satisfaction in the simple act of doing difficult things well. But for now, in the profound quiet of the Roman night, there is only rest and restoration, the peaceful sleep of someone who has found ways to live with purpose and grace within the boundaries that fate has drawn. In the deepest hours of night, when even Rome's most dedicated revelers have finally sought their beds and the city settles into something approaching true quiet, dreams carry the gladiator through landscapes both familiar and strange. Sometimes you walk again through the olive groves of your childhood, where the morning light filtered through silver green leaves, and the only sounds were birdsong and the distant bleating of goats. Your father is there teaching you to prune the trees with careful cuts that will encourage next year's growth, his weathered hands gentle with the branches, his voice patient as he explains the ancient rhythms of cultivation and harvest. Other dreams place you back in the legions, marching in formation through landscapes that stretched beyond imagination. Germanic forests, where the trees grew so thick that noon felt like twilight. Gallic plains where wildflowers painted the meadows in colors that had no names, mountains whose peaks disappeared into clouds that seemed close enough to touch. The camaraderie of those years returns in sleep, shared meals around campaign fires, the jokes and stories that made long marches bearable, the pride of being part of something larger than yourself, something that brought order and civilization to the far reaches of the world. But increasingly, dreams feature the life you've built here in the ludus, transformed by sleep's strange alchemy into something both more and less than reality. The training becomes a dance, weapons moving in patterns so beautiful they bring tears to your eyes. Fellow gladiators become brothers in truth, as well as circumstance, their faces shining with affection and respect that transcends the practical bonds of shared survival. Even the arena itself appears in these dreams, not as a place of danger, but as a stage where skill and courage can be displayed in their purest forms, where the crowd's appreciation is genuine recognition of artistry rather than bloodthirsty entertainment. The most vivid dreams often feature conversations with gladiators who didn't survive their arena careers, men whose cells are now occupied by newer fighters, but whose presence lingers in the wisdom they shared and the examples they set. These dream conversations carry the weight of guidance and blessing, reminders that courage and skill and dignity can make any life meaningful, regardless of its duration or the circumstances that shaped it. They speak of the satisfaction that comes from facing challenges without flinching, from building something valuable within whatever constraints exist, from finding brotherhood and purpose, even in the most unlikely places. Sometimes dreams venture into territory that feels like prophecy or vision, glimpses of a future where your arena career ends in triumph and freedom, where the wooden sword of retirement rests in hands that have earned the right to lay down arms forever. These dreams show you returning to the countryside with enough prize money to buy land and rebuild the agricultural life that war interrupted, but now with wisdom and experience that transforms simple farming into something approaching philosophy. The olive trees in these dreams grow straight and strong, their fruit abundant, their silver leaves catching sunlight that feels like blessing. But even the dreams of freedom carry with them the understanding that whatever life follows this one will be shaped by what you've learned here. The discipline of daily training, the clarity that comes from facing danger regularly, the deep appreciation for simple pleasures that develops when nothing can be taken for granted. These become permanent parts of character, valuable regardless of external circumstances. The gladiator you've become will influence whatever you become next, adding depth and strength to any future life. As the night ages and moves toward its completion, the quality of dreams shifts gradually from active adventure to peaceful contemplation. You find yourself sitting by firelight in a place that feels like home but looks like no home you've ever known, surrounded by people whose faces are familiar, even though you're certain you've never met them before. The conversation flows easily, touching on topics both profound and mundane. The best techniques for sharpening weapons, the way morning light looks different in different seasons, the satisfaction that comes from work done well and friends well chosen. These dreamtime conversations often include figures from history and legend, famous gladiators whose exploits are still recounted in taverns across the empire, philosophers whose ideas about courage and fate have influenced generations, even gods and heroes whose stories provide frameworks for understanding human experience. But in dreams, these legendary figures feel immediate and accessible, speaking not as distant authorities, but as fellow travelers who understand the challenges of living with purpose and integrity under difficult circumstances. The wisdom that emerges from these dream conversations isn't complex or abstract, but practical and immediate. Live fully in whatever circumstances you find yourself. Treat your body and your tools with the respect they deserve. Build genuine relationships with the people who share your challenges. Find ways to grow stronger and more skilled every day. Face whatever comes with courage and preparation. Take satisfaction in doing difficult things well. These simple principles, reinforced by dream after dream, become the foundation for a life that creates meaning from raw material that might otherwise seem hopeless. When morning finally arrives, seeping slowly through the small window and gradually lightening the stone walls of your cell, the transition from sleep to wakefulness is gentle and natural. The dreams fade gradually rather than disappearing abruptly, leaving behind a sense of having been refreshed, not just physically, but spiritually. The person who wakes is ready for another day of challenges, strengthened by rest and by the deep knowledge that this life, whatever its constraints, offers opportunities for growth and accomplishment and human connection that many more comfortable lives fail to provide. The first light of dawn brings with it the familiar sounds that mark the beginning of another day in the ludus. The distant scrape of kitchen workers preparing the morning meal, the soft conversations of early rising gladiators, the measured footsteps of guards changing shifts. But today, these sounds carry additional meaning, filtered through the wisdom that dreams have reinforced. Each routine task becomes an opportunity to practice excellence. Each interaction with fellow gladiators becomes a chance to strengthen bonds that make survival not just possible, but meaningful. Each moment of preparation becomes an investment in skills that transform necessity into artistry. Rising from the straw mattress and beginning the morning routine of washing and dressing, you carry with you not just the physical restoration that comes from quality sleep, but the psychological renewal that comes from understanding your place in larger patterns of human experience. The gladiator who faces this new day is the same person who fell asleep last night, but also someone slightly different, enriched by dreams, strengthened by rest, and prepared to meet whatever challenges arise with the full resources of body, mind, and spirit working in harmony. As consciousness fully returns and the day's possibilities stretch out ahead like an unmarked scroll waiting to be written upon, there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that you've learned to live well within the circumstances that chose you. The arena may be waiting, with its crowds and its dangers and its opportunities for triumph or disaster, but you'll meet it as you've learned to meet everything else with preparation, courage, skill, and the deep understanding that dignity and meaning can be found in any life that's lived with full commitment to excellence and human connection. The Gladiator's day begins again, each morning a fresh opportunity to practice the arts of living well under pressure, of finding grace within constraint, of building something valuable from whatever materials life provides. And in that daily renewal, perhaps, lies a wisdom that extends far beyond the specific circumstances of ludus and arena, a reminder that the human capacity for growth and meaning-making can transform any situation into an opportunity for something approaching greatness, one day, one challenge, one small victory at a time. In the growing light of another Roman dawn, as the sounds of the waking city drift through the stone walls and mingle with the quiet stirrings of your fellow gladiators, there's a moment of perfect clarity. This is not the life you planned, but it has become the life you've mastered. These are not the circumstances you would have chosen, but they have become the circumstances that have revealed what you're truly capable of. This may not be freedom as others define it, but you have found a way to be free within it, free to excel, free to grow, free to find meaning and purpose and brotherhood in the most unlikely of places. And as you prepare to step once more into the training yard, to face whatever challenges this new day might bring, you carry with you the accumulated wisdom of all the days that came before, the supportive companions who understand your struggles, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can meet whatever lies ahead with skill and courage and grace. The Roman gladiator stands ready to begin another day, not as a victim of circumstances, but as someone who has learned to transform even the most constraining situations into opportunities for human excellence.